What is up, everybody? Welcome, welcome, welcome. What's up, Josh? How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just talking about we're covering both coasts here, New York, California. We got it. You came like from a long day of commuting, so I very much appreciate you coming on to discuss
Yeah, no,
this.
absolutely. Yeah, we've got all the time zones covered. I came in, finished up some emails, and now I'm ready to chat about the Adelson crime family.
After you said like a 2-hour commute, I mean, brutal. Everything should be virtual.
It, yeah, it's one of those
Almost
things where
everything.
we learned during COVID we could do it, and for some reason, the law, especially the criminal law, all the civil courts decided to stick with virtual, but all the criminal courts decided that no, they need to go back to in-person stuff. And yeah, I had to make an appearance. I drove 2 hours, made a 5-minute appearance, and then hop back in my car to go drive 2 hours to get back home again. It
Brutal.
was not a fun way to spend the morning.
I remember 45 minutes being a rough, like I was I was just like, why am I doing this? 2 hours. That is a brutal, brutal commute. But
Yeah.
for folks who don't know who Josh is, he came on with me and Bob when we were covering Karen Reed, and he was just awesome. So I reached out to him to discuss this case. Josh has worked as a prosecutor with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office for close to a decade. After a career specializing in complex and high-profile cases, bringing more than 40 cases to jury verdict, with a felony conviction rate over 90%, Josh was named the 2015 Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year by the Association of Deputy District Attorneys. And Josh, if I'm correct, you kind of did George Costanza where you're like, I'm out. Like I reached the top. Is that correct? You were just like after that, you're like, I'm out of here. Do I
Yeah,
have that right?
I got that award at the end. I got that award, I think, in October of 2015, and by November, I put in my resignation papers.
You reached the top, and
It
you're like, guys,
wasn't
that's
planned
this.
exactly that way, but that's how it worked out.
So other than that, Josh hosts Courtroom Confidential, your weekly rendezvous with the latest updates and headline making criminal cases nationwide. He brings a unique blend of professionalism and a personal touch to the table. Join Josh every Friday to explore the ever developing legal landscape and gain a deeper understanding of how the legal system operates. We are sharing the links, folks. Josh's YouTube and podcast and all his socials is so good. So please make sure you're all subscribing. Andrea just subscribed. Thank you. You won't
Thank
regret
you,
it.
guys.
His content is great, and he's posting it everywhere. So please check it out. So let's get into this case. Donna Adelson, trial coming up in September. And if you guys can believe it or not, today is July 16th. July 18th, 2 days from now, will be 10 years since Dan Markel was murdered by the Adelson. 10 years, July 18th, 2014.
Wow.
Yeah, 10 years. This is going to be the fourth trial. So what I want to ask you, first of all, as a prosecutor, this is going to be essentially, I mean, they've been a little bit different trials, but essentially the fourth run for the same team. Have you ever had that many? Have you ever done it? I mean, I'm sure you probably had a hung jury on how to do a case again, but four times. I mean, they have to have this pretty much down pat, right? I mean, most
It's become their career. They thought they became prosecutors, and they found out that they became just the Dan Markel prosecution.
Sorry about that. Let me turn off that sound effect. Sorry, go ahead.
That's pretty incredible. I did not realize it's going on a decade now that those investigators too, the investigators, the prosecution team, they've all just been living with this. And I imagine not handling much else in the background. I mean, it's such an all-encompassing, complex, super important case that I imagine this has been the only thing on their plates for the last 10 years. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I've had retrials before. They're exhausting. I said this when that Karen retrial hung, and we knew it was going to be a retrial, even though it hasn't been officially put on the calendar yet. Having known Alan Jackson, that's an exhausting undertaking because you put so much emotional energy into the trial, and you leave everything on the field, and then for it to come back and say, hey, you got to gear up and do this all over again. This is a little bit different because it's not like they're retrying this. They're getting convictions every step of the way, but still it's a huge emotional, physical, mental undertaking to put together a trial of this magnitude. There was one case out of LA that, now that you're making me think about it, horrible, horrible, horrible case about a man who was accused of throwing his 5-year-old daughter off of a cliff.
Oh,
And that case was retried. I believe it was retried 3 times by the same prosecutor here in LA. And it became like a story of like a fable almost. Like we had all heard about, oh my God, he's going back for it again, because it hung twice and then he finally was able to get a conviction the 3rd time around. But it became like his career was just kind of handling that one case. So I imagine the same thing is happening here with the Adelson prosecutors, as they're just continuing to just tick these people off their list of everyone who was involved. And it looks like we might be to the end, but maybe not. And I think we might get into that later.
yeah, well, I definitely want to get into that. But also it's interesting, this case, because, and I'm dying to get your thoughts on this, Josh. So, Charlie Adelson, Donna Adelson's son, last year convicted. He's convicted. His attorney, Dan Rauschbaum, is now Donna Adelson's attorney. And then we get a new amended witness list from the state. And who do they list as a witness? Charlie Adelson, and they put care of Dan Rauschbaum. I had Katie Boken-Schutz, who's a former prosecutor and defense attorney, and she's like, listen, this is kind of like almost like them like saying like, you can't represent him. Is there any way where if Charlie Adelson is called as a witness in Donna Adelson's trial in a case where Donna Adelson's attorney is Dan Rauschbaum and also Charlie Adelson's attorney is Dan Rauschbaum, that he could stay on as the attorney where his co-counsel handled like the question, or does he got to go? Is there any way that they could keep going?
I think the answer to this is, even if there's a slim way that he could do it, I don't think he should. I think it just opens up the doors to so many appellate problems down the road, because, it's not. I've had situations where, as a defense attorney, I've handled more than one member of a family or friends who are they have aligned defenses, and you have to, first of all, you have to get them to sign a conflict waiver, because there is a conflict. It doesn't matter. You're different people. You might have different defenses, and so just to represent 2 people in the same case, you've got to get all sorts of conflict waivers, because the court is concerned with that immediately. This is slightly different because his case is already done and now it's, on to the mother. But still, even if you're saying, and even if the Adelsons are saying, I have the same exact defense, my defense is in no way opposed to what my son's defense was, you don't know how things are going to evolve in trial. You don't know what issues might come up. And it might not even be something where her defense becomes adverse to Charlie's, but it might be where her defense calls into question some of Charlie's defense, or calls into question some of the things because he took the stand. So it might involve impeaching some of what he may have testified to, because that may be advantageous to Donna's defense. Again, I'm just kind of riffing here on the possibilities, but imagine if that presents itself. Now you've got the attorney who represented that person, Charlie, now essentially trying to impeach some of Charlie's case in his representation of Donna. If he doesn't do that, doesn't that open up the way for Donna on appeal to say, I wasn't appropriately or adequately represented by my attorney because he had split interests? Right. I just think you're asking for trouble. It looks like the beginnings of a cluster. And it's like, that might be kind of the temporary thing that's happening, but I can't imagine it will go to trial that way. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it's asking for trouble.
To your point, I mean, the judge even had them like do it on the record, the waivers, but now this is a new thing that's come out, that this is a witness here. So, and speaking of the defense, the defense was, if for folks who don't know, who are maybe new to this case, is that this is some sort of extortion, that the killers, rather than just robbing the Adelsons, decided they were going to kill Dan Markel and then extort Charlie by killing him and then getting like a payment pen. It's like like a pay. I mean, it's just a ridiculous. And the jury came back within 3 hours, but really it was like 2 because there was a lunch. So here's my question to you: if you're putting you're in the defense, you're going with that same thing. You kind of sort of have to, because she was involved in that defense. Yeah. He said when he testified that, like, yeah, I told my mom about this, but I told her not to tell the cops. So they're kind of stuck with it, but like, what can you do?
Yeah,
If you
I
have a
mean, I
defense?
think I don't think they're stuck with it because of what he testified to at his trial, because, and we can get into that later, whether or not he's actually going to be called as a witness, whether or not they can use his statements from the previous trial, or how that all can work out. But let's assume that his testimony is not actually at play. Even the recordings, the jailhouse calls that they have since that time, she's a little bit married to that theory, at least that he put forth in his case. I think what you'll see out of her is a lot more of, I had no idea what was going on. This was Charlie and his girlfriend's mixed up with these bad people and all that stuff. But I'm just this loving mother who's trying to do the best by their children. And I really had no idea of what was going on. I think you'll see a lot of that. I'm not saying her actually testifying to that, but I think that will be kind of the sum and substance of their defense. I'll say this too, and your listeners may go after me for this, but it's actually kind of a clever defense. I'm not saying it's a convincing defense. I'm not saying it's a defense that's going to win the day, but with the facts that they have, and that's a lot of times when you're a defense attorney, you got to work with the facts you've got. It is kind of a clever spin on everything, because it explains the money, and it explains the conversations with these people, and it explains why, it's not, I didn't know these people, I have no idea what happened, I wasn't involved in any sort of way. They had to somehow acknowledge, where's this money coming from? Where are all the communications coming from? Why aren't they immediately going to the police when they're confronted by these people who happen to be undercovers? And it's this idea, well, hey, we were being extorted by this incredibly, dangerous criminal street gang, and we didn't know how to handle it properly. It's on paper, it's not a bad first draft. It's just in the execution of it, it had some obvious holes.
Well, and plus the evidence is so strong. Like other, from the she's using the TV as code, and she, after the bump, she's calling Charlie and saying, the TV is about 5K, aka the TV, which was what was set up to kill Dan Markel, aka she has to pay 5,000. Like, it's so bad. And this is not, for me, this is not like Karen Weaver, where I was like, listen, I'm waiting to see all the evidence. We've seen three trials. I've seen the evidence. I've seen 3 trials. Yeah. It's different. This is a different case, in my opinion. If you're coming to my channel for like a neutral position, I think she's guilty. And because we've seen all the evidence, like, it's been vetted in trial, and there's been 3 convictions. Like, you're not going to convince me that she's wasn't a part of this. But let me ask you this: you kind of referenced her testifying. Do you think there's any way? First of all, just based on her how she acts, I think she's going to want to. But do you think she has to testify in order to get some sort of story out there?
That the way you ask that is perfect, because it's really 2 questions. There's the question of should she, and then there's the question of will she. And the question of should she, I think, is only if it becomes absolutely necessary. I mean, for the most part, and we saw this with Charlie Adelson, there you've got a very intelligent guy, a guy who, by the way, his testimony was about as good as you could hope for. You know what I mean? He had answers to the questions. There was no kind of obvious lying that he did.
There wasn't an aha moment. We were all expecting a moment where she got him, but there wasn't. Sorry.
He was prepared. He knew what was coming. He knew kind of how to handle it. Now, you can criticize the answers. You can criticize how maybe over prepared he was for it, but he did. He didn't completely. The wheels didn't fall off. And yet still that wasn't successful. So that's how hard it is to testify as a defendant. We saw this with Murdoch as well, that you got a very intelligent guy. The guy's a trial attorney, and still the jurors saw right through his testimony. So for a defense attorney, putting a client on the stand is always, I think, a Hail Mary. But the better question is, will she? Because one, might it be a situation where they're forced into it? In other words, is the only way they can get certain evidence or testimony on the record through her? And 2, you've got this interesting personality, is the way I'll put it. And psychology plays a huge role in this. And of all of the things that an attorney has strategic control over in a trial, what kind of witnesses to call, what questions to ask. Whether or not the defendant takes the stand is the one thing that's not in their control. If your client wants to take the stand, they are allowed to, and you are obliged to let them take the stand. And she might feel, this is a person, if everything that the prosecution is saying is true about her, she is a deeply diabolical person who's gotten away with a lot in her life, and she may feel that she's just going to get up there and charm and tell people otherwise.
Absolutely. I mean, within, I think, this is not, if you guys haven't followed her, like the pretrial hearings, within 5 minutes of her first hearing with Judge Everett, which is the judge she'll be in front of, the judge had to tell her to calm down, because they had this hearing because she, on those jail calls, she said she was going to unalive herself. And they had her in like this special cell. They had her in solitary. She wanted out of there. They're describing it, and she scoffs. She says, and the judge is like, and she's like, "You're lying." Well, I forget what she says exactly, but the judge is like, "Miss Adelson, you have to wait." Like, so that's within 5 minutes of her first appearance. So first of all, I'm just curious. Like, Charlie during his trial was very animated. He was making faces. He was laughing. I mean, Georgia Kaplan even brought it up that he was laughing at a certain point. How is there, when you have a client like that, is there any way, like, or to control them? Like, I'm sure you do your best. Like, listen, stone-faced, don't make, but like at a certain point, there's nothing you can do, right? They're just going to be who they are.
No, I mean, even going back farther than her first appearance, her arrest video is one of the most entertaining pieces of videotape I've ever seen. And you already see it there. She cannot keep her mouth shut. She's indignant. She's appalled at the conditions and the way she's being treated. I mean, I watched it not too long ago, and I was just laughing at the one part where the cop is giving her a sip of water, and she keeps on making him give her more sips. And it just kind of was a small microcosmic view of this woman who has just kind of been catered to her entire life. And now she finds herself in a very different situation. But to answer your question, no. And here's why it's different than anything else, because you can prepare and you can sit and you can do mock cross-examinations and you can take all the time in the world that you want. But when they're on the stand, there's no timeout. There's no, hey, cut. Can I speak to my attorney for a second? There's no life, preserver you can throw them. They are on there, and if it starts to go sideways, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just they're going to go down in flames if that's the way it starts to go. And that's what you see a lot of times, is that they have not in their own head the reality of their predicament, and how smart they may feel they are becomes exposed very quickly, that they're not that smart when they're up against very, very accomplished attorneys with the crucible of cross-examination, and they start to just fall apart, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And the background now of, like we discussed, 4 trials. Like, you're not going to trip them up. This isn't they've done this. And you made me think there's no moment, like, for folks who remember Saved by the Bell, where Zach goes, time out, and they stop. Like, there's not that. Freeze. Yeah, there's not that moment where everyone pauses and when they set everything up. And to your point about the arrest, I think, to me, the wildest thing is right when they go to arrest her. First of all, she takes her phone. She's like, "You're not taking my phone." But her response is, "Oh, here we go." Not like, what do you mean you're arresting me? No, it's, "Oh my God, here we go." Like, when you get to like, you buy tickets to a game and someone's sitting in your seat. "Oh, here we go." Someone's like, that's her response to getting arrested for murder.
Her filet mignon came undercooked. "Oh, here we go. I'm gonna have to send this back to bring the waiter over." Yeah, you're being arrested for murder, lady. This is the last time you will probably breathe free air again. And it was a really amazing kind of view of her psychology. And before that moment, we had just kind of heard a lot about it in secondhand from Wendy and Charlie and all these people giving interviews and testimony about how controlling she was, and then you got to actually see it in action.
And by the way, she's arrested because the feds get tipped off that she has bought a one-way ticket to Vietnam with her husband, a one-way ticket. So let me ask you this, Josh. when it comes to
conveniently to a country that doesn't extradite.
yeah, exactly. And it's not it ain't she didn't buy a brown trip. This wasn't a vacay that she was going there. So let me ask you this. How strong of evidence is consciousness of guilt? Like how strong will that be when they be like, oh, so here's the body cam of her trying to escape the country and never come back? I assume the defense is to be, well, we saw with our son the trial that he got, and we
Right.
just knew we weren't gonna get a fair shake, right? I mean, is that probably how they're gonna go with it? You would think.
I think consciousness of guilt evidence is sometimes some of the most powerful evidence that a prosecutor can present. It's funny, but there's something about jurors really dig into the psychology of how would they act if they were accused of a crime, and how would they behave if they were an innocent person accused of a crime. And when they start to see the defendant behave differently and drastically differently than that, that becomes incredibly powerful evidence, sometimes more powerful than some of the things that may have occurred before the crime, some of the stuff that led to the actual indictment itself. It's these, the jail calls after the crime is committed. It's the trying to flee the country. It's all of this, behavior that really jurors like to hang their hats on that type of stuff.
So you would assume they're going to bring in those jail calls and listen to them about
Oh
all
yeah.
the things she's saying.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So-
yeah. If I were prosecuting the case, I mean, and these are, like you've said several times before, very able prosecutors, and they know this case better than probably anybody on earth. But yeah, that's gold when you get handed jailhouse calls like that. That are either directly or indirectly hinting at knowledge of the crime and everything else. No, it's very powerful stuff. I mean, consciousness of guilt is powerful evidence, but the other type of evidence that's powerful is words out of the defendant's own mouth, and whether that's them testifying or them in a police interview or them in a jailhouse recorded phone call. Jurors just love to hear that stuff.
And by the way, guys, we keep sharing Josh's links. Please, if this is the kind of thing you're going to get, just measured, reasonable commentary. He's awesome. His channel is awesome. Please
Thank
subscribe if you haven't already, guys. And if you're on the
Thank you,
replay
guys.
crew, it's in the description. So let me ask you this. So potentially, we have Charlie Adelson going to testify. Obviously, he's going to be in his jail jail scrubs or whatever you want to call his jail outfit. And last trial we had that with Katie Magbanoa. She all of a sudden had denied it. Then all of a sudden she decides she's going to testify. And obviously her testimony is against Charlie and it's against Donna. So how does it look like just looking at that as a juror, like where they're going to call these two inmates who are both guilty. One is her son. Like that's got to also just be like, I'm just trying to think of a way, if there's any way that the defense cannot get any sort of reasonable doubt. But isn't that a big thing to have two people who are convicted? But I guess go ahead.
I'm not sure of the rules in Florida as far as like when they compile their witness lists, like if they're supposed to be exhaustive, so they might include people that they, put on that list that they really don't have an intention of calling or not. But assuming they actually intend to call him, first of all, Magbanoa was a little bit different because she waived any kind of Fifth Amendment issue. She wanted to testify. She felt that she had to right some sort of wrong. Perhaps she felt that somewhere down the line, this was going to help her out somehow. I also feel that she felt burnt by this whole situation. She wasn't going to go down and be the only one to go down when it was really these people who were the ones driving this whole murder to begin with. But with Charlie, it's a little bit different because one, he still has a Fifth Amendment right. Even though his trial's over, there's still an appeal pending. He still doesn't have to testify. So it would be a situation where either the prosecution would have to grant him some sort of immunity, which I don't think that's been discussed. Even if they do, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll testify, or he could decide to waive any kind of issue or accept any kind of immunity and decide that it's somehow helpful to his mother. And maybe he feels that, this is he's going down, but he's not going to let mom go down. And then it could be very interesting because you could see the only way I think it could be helpful to her is not some half-hearted, well, mom didn't know anything about this. I was still being extorted, everybody. I'm still innocent, but mom didn't know anything about it. I think if he wants to do anything, he has to say, yeah, I did it. And mom knew nothing about it. I don't see how any other way that is helpful to her.
Right. And the interesting thing is to think about, like you said before, kind of like they've had this life of like luxury, and they've just been for 10 years up till, Charlie up till a couple years ago, and her Donna until they've just been living like nothing happened. So it's got to be interesting just to think about what's going on in their heads in jail. Charlie had to be moved out of Florida. He's in like South Dakota. Wendy's and so it's just interesting to think like what's going on in their heads right now. Is it like, do they want to reach out? Do they want to like it's just an interesting dynamic.
I think you are going down a very dark and scary path if you try to psychoanalyze these folks, because there is some gene in that family that is so twisted to be able to. I mean, can you imagine the conversations that took place that led up to this? Like you said, people living a life of privilege. They're not criminals. They didn't have a lifetime of committing crimes, violent crimes. And they start to float this idea. And how does that turn from, wouldn't it really be great if he were just dead? Yeah, it would be. And then that conversation turns into a more serious conversation, and to a more serious conversation into well, we need to get money. Well, we need to find someone. Well, Catherine might know somebody. And that how evil and twisted do you got to be? And at no point does anybody go, wait a minute, this is insane. What are we actually talking about here? We're not going to actually do this. And no one pulled that ripcord, and they continued to go straight forward with it.
Right. And two children, the father of their
Wendy grandchildren.
They have two kids, grandchildren, and no one was like, whoa, like to your point. Yeah. No, they were like, I just think it's a case where they just thought they wouldn't get away with it. They thought that, and they did for a long time. And, finally now is the time, 10 years later. Where hopefully there's some justice here. So let's get into Wendy. And I don't know how much you know about, her involvement. I'm very much under the thought that she had to, first of all, that family is super enmeshed. Second of all, she drove by the crime scene the day of. She drove by out of her way, which the prosecution brings up in each trial, which she lies about in each trial. It's a big deal. Some people I don't know, poo-poo that and to me, that's a big deal. She drove by and out of her way, and then she lies about it in 3 trials. She also, what came out in the most recent trial was during the birthday party, which essentially what the state is saying is that this was Harvey Adelson's 70th birthday gift. That's kind of how they talked about this hit between the family members, was a birthday gift. You can believe that. Wendy is at their house on that birthday, texting Dan Markel saying, "Hey, where are you going to be the weekend when it happened?" So they have this stuff and they bring it up each time. So I'm just curious, from what you've covered and what you watched of Wendy, what do you think of her overall? Do you think that she had? I mean, obviously, if they had enough, they would have arrested her by now. So
yeah, well, interesting point though, right? I mean, because you would have thought if they had I don't think much changed from the point, the point leading up to the arrest of Donna, right? I mean, so it's like, for whatever reason, they decided to sit on that through his whole trial before they went ahead and arrested her.
True.
I mean, perhaps they're doing the same with Wendy, but I think that you're right that the kind of more traditional way of thinking about it would be they would have arrested her now already. There's really no advantage to letting her remain free if they feel that they've got enough to indict her. Having just said what I said about how diabolical this family is, if she is involved to the point of knowing that they did this beforehand, maybe that's the better way to look at it, knowing that they planned to do this and went ahead and executed it, then she's maybe the most twisted of all of them, because then you are talking about taking out the father of her children. The reactions that she had during that police interview seemed so genuine to me. I'm no lie detector, but I watched that, and that to me appears to be someone who's genuinely in shock over what's taking place.
You're gonna have to watch it again, Josh. You and me are gonna have to watch it again together. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You feel that differently about it? You think
Oh
she's
yeah.
kind of, oh,
I
really?
I think she's full of shit. Oh yeah.
Wow. I mean, you could be right. I mean, like I said, this, I mean, when it comes down to it, she's the one that has the most to gain
Yeah.
from all of it. So, I don't know. I don't know. With this case, I would not be shocked.
Well, it's interesting because they haven't arrested her yet, but they did put in the legal documents that she is a co-conspirator. So it's not like they're like she didn't have anything to do with this. They have her in the filings as a co-conspirator. So that, I mean, they wouldn't just put that in there if they
Right.
if they didn't think something was going on. Can you talk a little bit about? So she has been basically subpoenaed to testify, and I know this comes up a lot. And so she has use and derivative
Yeah.
immunity. So essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, but that means what she uses and what's derived from her testimony during these trials cannot be used against her, right? Is that basically what that means?
Yeah, use immunity is the most common type of immunity, and what it basically says is they cannot use the words out of your own mouth against you. Um, that doesn't mean that they can't ever prosecute you, and that doesn't mean that they can't even ever prosecute you about what you're actually, either testifying to, or if it's during a proffer or something like that, an interview. They just can't use your words directly against you. But they can still further their investigation. They can use your words to further their investigation against other people. But it's an ability that allows someone, one, it frees up any kind of Fifth Amendment concern, and it allows someone, sometimes they do this with witnesses that they don't have any intention of actually indicting, but they want that person to feel free to go ahead and testify without the fear that somehow these words will come back to bite them. So that's how it's most commonly used. It's different than just given, a free-for-all immunity against everything. It just means that they cannot use your words against you.
Now,
Sorry if that was long and convoluted.
no, that was good. I thank you. It's confusing, and the judge even has to explain it in some of the trials. He has to explain because the jury in
Yeah.
one of the first trial, the jury got to ask questions, but they haven't got to since then. One interesting thing to think about, and I don't know why this just came to my head, but during Charlie's trial, Donna and Harvey were not there, which was interesting. They, first of all, obviously didn't testify. They've never testified, but they weren't there in the gallery, nor Wendy. So they're not there. They don't come for Charlie's trial. Now, do you think Harvey is going to be there watching? I don't think Wendy is. I think it's going to be the same thing with Charlie, where she comes in, does her testimony, and gets out of there. Do you think that's a big deal for the jury not to have family members? Do you think that matters at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I obviously, to see a large support group there might play some role in the jurors' heads, but at the same time, I don't think it's all that impactful if it's your family members. It's kind of expected, but then I guess the question is, if there's nobody there, does that mean that you've kind of been abandoned? The interesting one is, if what you're asking is if her own husband is not there during it. Yeah, that to me might have some impact. I don't know. Not to the point that, guilty or not guilty, but jurors are people too, and they might feel like, God, this lady doesn't even have her husband there.
Right, and you would probably think they were probably thinking like, so for Charlie's, like, the sisters comes in. I mean, it would make sense for the first two. There's no really relation, between the hitman and Katie and Sigfredo. Like, she comes in, she testifies, she leaves. But I would think that, like, with Charlie, like, oh, so she's just gonna come in here real quick for Charlie, her brother, and then get out of there. Like, maybe they don't think about it, but maybe they do. So that'll be super interesting to see if Harvey shows up. Particularly, if they're going to show that video, he's in the video. He is also fleeing the country with her.
Yeah.
So that'll be
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't want to. You know this case better than I do. Have you run across anything that you feel implicates him? I mean, putting aside really?
Well, his Lexus, his car was given to Kate, was a car that Katie got. He signed it over. I mean, it was through Charlie, but also the payments were made through, like, the Adelson. I mean, Donna signed the checks, but it was his Adelson Institute that was paying Katie McBono. They're writing the checks. So you're telling me that Donna's writing these checks and Harvey just has no idea. And by the way, he's on every.
Go ahead.
He's on every call. They brag about during the trials. Wendy brags about her mom and dad are so close. They have a joint email. Like he's involved with everything. He is in the car when Wendy's in the police interview. She calls, she's in Tallahassee. She calls down South Florida. She calls them. It's like, hey, Dan was shot. Before they drive up to support, their daughter, they go to Charlie's and give them the money. I mean, that's the state's that's what Katie McBown testifies. So she thinks that it was Donna who's the one who stapled the money and was moldy because she washed it because she thought she was laundering the money. But Harvey's there every step of the way. Harvey is not, to me, is not like a separate entity who wasn't aware of all these things that are going down.
And I wonder why he wasn't indicted as well, because I always took him to be this kind of, kind of beaten, henpecked sort of husband.
Well, if you see that video, he's very much. She's like, she says to police, he's 80 years old. He can't get out of here. You can't do this to him. That's what she wants you to think. I mean,
just signing the checks as long just don't disturb my tea time kind of a deal is the way I always pictured him. But I don't know. I mean, you make an excellent point. It's like this wasn't some one conversation conspiracy. This is so elaborate and so involved in so many conversations and moving parts with, cars being signed over and checks being written and everything else. It's like, how did he, even if he's got his head halfway buried in the sand, how does he not suspect something's going on? And if he does, then what he's suspicious of is, murder. I mean, we're not talking about tax evasion. We're talking about somebody took the life of the father of their grandchildren, and he's just kind of buried his head on the whole thing.
Yeah, and to your point, 2 trips. There were 2 trips the hitman made, and the prosecution, to me, does one of the best jobs with their presentation. I don't know if they have this awesome, basically, PowerPoint where it shows the faces of, Donna, Charlie, Wendy, Katie, and it has the calls and it has arrows going, oh, well, and they just did it. To me, that's why they make it very simple, even though it's a very complicated thing that happened. They make it very simple with those PowerPoints and those visuals. Like, this is the call to her. This is the call that we broke down all their calls, and we could see, each. And by the way, it's on the first trip, even though the hit didn't happen on the first trip. It's the same parties, back and forth. Second trip, same parties. And by the way, the morning of Dan's murder, Charlie's talking to Wendy for 18 minutes and 17 seconds. What is that conversation about? After Donna says, hey, I got the Best Buy guy coming, who was like their alibi. So there's a lot there. I want to make sure we get, I asked our members here on YouTube, and I want to make sure we get to these questions. I don't know if we did already. So this is from Neely848, one of our YouTube members. Thank you, Neely, for this question. My question for Josh: if Sigfredo Garcia testifies, will he be allowed to say what Katie Magbanua told him about Donna, or would that be hearsay? And if hearsay, how can Georgia get those facts out about what the shooter knew about Donna? For folks who don't know, Sigfredo was the gunman who shot Dan Markel. He has not testified in any of the trials. And I had Indra Velasquez, who was like, there's no way that man ever testifies. But if he does, Josh, what do you think about this question?
Well, the straightforward answer to it is anything that was told to Sigfredo from Magbanua she's relating what Donna told her is obviously hearsay. If it's Donna told me X, Y, and Z, and she's telling that to Sigfredo, that's hearsay. And he's testifying to what he was told by Catherine. So yeah, we got all sorts of hearsay problems there. But just because it's hearsay, there doesn't mean there isn't some sort of exception to it. And it could, could be his state of mind. It's not that he's testifying to the truth of what she is telling him, but just what she told him affect how he then conducted himself? Did he take then certain steps, or did he do something in response to that, or say something in response to that? So there's many times clever ways to get some of that testimony in, but it's a great question to identify that they're going to have problems with these people, because if it were the defendant's statements, no problem whatsoever. But when you're talking about all of these other people who are previously convicted and not currently the defendant in the current trial, you're going to have hearsay problems.
All right, awesome. All right, so Cynthia Meadows says, awesome. I'm curious if Josh thinks Donna will testify And if she does, will it be as laughable as Charlie's testimony? Well, overall, what do you think? Do you think that she's going to testify?
I think she might. This case is so crazy that I feel like you got to go with what the craziest scenario might be. I don't think it's a smart move by her or her attorneys, but that's what he did. And I think she might feel like she has to explain to these jurors that she didn't know anything. And yes, I think it probably will end up being as laughable because I think she's just as narcissistic, if not more, than Charlie. And I think she will think she's just more clever than everybody in the room. I mean, that to me is what I saw when he was laughing. That to me wasn't a person who thought anything was funny. That was a person who thought he was smarter than everyone else. And this was kind of him. It was almost like he's laughing at how ridiculous he feels the prosecution is with their questions.
He's scoffing.
And isn't
he's
that
just like,
cute?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dismissiveness almost. And, I think she's the queen bee of all of that when it comes to that family.
Bugapoo, who is in here, Cheryl, I'm curious if Wendy will testify. I mean, she's testified in every other trial, so I think for sure she is. I don't think. I mean, I guess maybe the question is it because maybe it's her mom. She's not going to, but right, she's got.
No, I think the prosecution will make her.
Right.
I think she's important to the prosecution for establishing certain things, and I think they'll just make her. And she's already pinned. Like you said, she's testified so many times now that she's pinned down to a certain testimony, so it's not going to be a shocker to anybody what she's going to say.
One thing I want to bring up, there have been 3 other trials, but you as a former prosecutor knows there are certain things about Donna in this specific that they probably haven't brought out yet, right? I mean, obviously not the conscious of guilt because that just happened, but they also put in their last their last discovery where they listed the witnesses. They have ledgers that they found. They have their electronics, so there's going to be some new stuff, right, Josh? We're not going to know about until the trial. That they're going to bring out here. There's probably going to be even more damning than stuff we already know about.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think this prosecution team too has demonstrated that they're not trying to overreach on their prosecution here, that they've have very solid case against everyone they brought a case against. And I think what we'll hear more than anything is just more of Donna's statements, because for those same hearsay reasons, a lot of that's not going to be allowed in the prosecution of other defendants. But when she's the defendant, you can get everything she's ever said in. So we'll hear a lot more about what she may have had to say in the past.
And, as far as her electronics, you brought up her jail calls. Half the time, she didn't even realize she thought she hung up. She didn't realize she was being recorded. So you better believe those electronics, even if she tried to erase stuff, which she probably didn't even try. Yeah. She probably didn't even realize you can, erase your sent items. Like I bet her sent folder is, she may have deleted stuff that came in, but she probably doesn't even realize like half the stuff and even when you do delete it, they don't really delete it. So there's going to be some stuff I think that comes out that's going to be pretty interesting. The question is any of that stuff pretty interesting that brings in Wendy, because Wendy was smarter about that stuff, but perhaps her parents weren't so smart when they were sending her things. We already know about those emails where she said awful things about Dan, that her mom, saying that they should dress the kids as Hitler Youth, all these things that I'm sure Donna's like, why is she's saying these things in emails? This is not something you should probably.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Wendy being the one with the motive and the most to gain, but it's really Donna was at least in the things that I've seen as far as emails and conversations, she's the one that it seems to have the most anger and animosity towards Dan. She may not have the most to gain, but she was certainly the one who was most pleased when he ended up dead.
Absolutely. And literally she's saying, let's dress my Jewish grandchildren in Hitler Youth uniforms to mess with Dan. Let's convert them to Christianity. I don't care. But if this is a war. Essentially, this was a war. She made it a war, and they were going to do whatever they had to do to win, to the point where they killed a man, which is just
it's so spiteful, hateful human being. Yeah.
So yeah, that's really what I'm curious to see when they get that stuff. And let me ask you this, as someone who's been a prosecutor, you have a team, right? That's just like they're trying to crack that stuff, and are you like following up with them like every so often? Hey, you guys got anything new, or are they coming to you like, hey, we put in this password however many times and we still haven't been, because they could potentially, if they're stuck, like one of the iPads they haven't been able to like crack yet, basically, whether it's old technology.
Really?
It might be because it's old. It's like an old iPad. I think
Yeah.
that's what I heard. Like they just haven't been, but I'm sure they're working on it, right? So are you just constantly like, hey,
Yeah.
you guys got everything new? Like, how does that work between?
Yeah, I mean, you can't let it slow down your case, because you're on a timeline now, especially now that she's been arrested. There's all sorts of constitutional timing issues that they have to be concerned with. But yeah, you're hoping that your team is continuing to work on stuff. I've had cases. It's rare, but I've had cases where soon before trial, we get some breakthrough on some evidence that we have to turn over, which usually ends up causing a delay. Like if they were to get into that, you said it was an iPad.
Yeah, they had an old iPad and phones.
They were able to get into that, and that's got a bunch of information that may cause a delay in the whole trial. But yeah, I mean, this team, this investigative team, they really, you cover a lot of different trials where you see a lot of varying degrees of prosecutorial acumen and talent from the investigators and everything else. And I would put these folks on the very competent, very qualified end of things. They've just done a remarkable job.
Absolutely. Georgia Kappelman, Sarah Dugan. We even have an emoji for Georgia there. She has been just amazing during this trial. Yeah, they really do a really, really good job. So it's going to be interesting, folks. And I don't think this is getting pushed back. Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, this isn't going to go on the 17th. They've already rescheduled it because it was initially set up for Jewish holidays, so they put it back. I mean, this is probably going. So we're going to be covering it. And C2 says, oh, look at this. You should do more lives. That's guys.
All right.
Well, I hope everyone is subscribing over to Josh's channel, checking out his videos, liking, commenting, and looking out for future lives. Actually, we may cover, guys. If the next week is Donna Adelson's next appearance. Let me ask you this: do you think they're going to bring up, or it's now that the judge has seen that discovery, and it's like, oh, look, this is, Charlie is listed as, they've already done the waiver thing, but you think the judge brings it up again? Hey, this is now a witness. We got to talk about this, or they're just talking about like scheduling.
I think so. I mean, I think that might be hashed out at this last. Again, I don't know. I mean, because if he's called as a witness, then he's going to have to be, quote unquote, cross-examined by her attorney, who was his previous attorney. And then how, the more I think about it, the more I think you just can't do it. Because what if now Charlie says something that, because that attorney has a special relationship with him, having had a prior relationship with him, knows to be inaccurate and knows to be something he can impeach? How does he handle that situation? It just puts the attorney, even if he can pull it off, it puts the attorney in a position where I think Donna can later on say, I wasn't adequately represented because he had split interests in the way that he was conducting my trial. That to me is the biggest problem. Even if he's able to kind of pull off that tight wire act, it just creates too many problems down the road.
Let me ask you this. Is there any concern as a prosecutor, if you're a prosecutor, where you're thinking, I don't want to, like, they're going to think of like this 73-year-old woman is a grandma, and there's just no way in my mind that I can put it in that she, I think that, but then I think there's those emails we just talked about. Do you have any concern about that?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think you voir dire on that. I think you ask people about that. I think you ask people, hey, go ahead and take a look at the defendant. She's sitting right there. She's an elderly woman. She's wearing glasses. She's got health problems. Are you and just flat out get it out there in front of the jurors, and not let it be an issue that you kind of walk around. But I do agree with you that the second they start to actually hear who this woman truly is, they're not gonna have any problems with convicting her, despite her age and everything else.
Yeah, because she's.
I mean, we had what was his name? crap, the old guy out here in Los Angeles, the cold case, and he, in a wheelchair and on oxygen and could barely get through it.
Golden State.
The Jinx. Why am I blanking on his name right now? Durst. Durst was barely alive during his trial out here, and they convicted him. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
I don't think they're going to have a problem once they figure out who he actually is, who she actually is.
Question: If he has co-counsel, so he does have co-counsel, could that be a way to? I see that in the chat. Thank you, Mia. Is that a way to resolve that? Or no?
No, not the issues that I'm bringing up. I think a judge. I would be surprised if a judge doesn't say you're going to need to have independent counsel for this trial. And, she has a constitutional right to have an attorney of her choosing. But I just feel that a judge may say that there's a conflict here. And despite your waivers, I feel that because the judge is trying to preserve, not only protect her interests, the judge is to some extent protecting Charlie's interests. Charlie still has constitutional rights to his own representation, and he may feel that this somehow infringes on his right to counsel. I don't know. It's such a weird scenario, and I'm actually quite a little shocked that the attorney said, "Yeah, I'll go for it." But maybe he got a big enough check written his way, and he said, "I'll figure it out."
You also would think Donna would be like, this might not be the best idea, as my son's verdict came in like less than 2 hours.
The other part is like, this guy didn't exactly pull off a miracle, so I don't know why you want this guy again. But I thought he was a fine attorney, but it's funny to me that she would be so insistent.
Yeah. Andrew says, any comment on the psychological why Wendy organized the murder of Dan? I mean, she had everything to gain. She wanted to move. She wanted to be with her family. She didn't want to be there. She was pissed at Dan. He was saying that she stole money. I mean, I don't know, Josh, if you've seen some of these. I've gone to them. I haven't finished it, but the divorce file, I think is 800 pages. Like, there are two binders. I've watched so many of the trials. There's two binders that Wendy has to bring up every time. There's a huge white one, which is the divorce file. I mean, these were like, they were going at each other in court and like accusing them. There were contempt motions. There was a motion from Dan where he's like, Donna can't have any visits that aren't, she has to have supervised visits, which I think was a big deal. They didn't want that. They were worried she was going to lose, have to deal with that. Like, they couldn't deal with that anymore. And one of the reasons I think that they went the way they did, they were just done with it. They wanted to have, and by the way, for folks who don't know, Dan Markel is shot on and murdered July 18th, and I think it's July 21st, 27th. Wendy's gone. Wendy's gone. She's done. She leaves like 3 days later and moves. She's down in South Florida. She got what she wanted. Donna got what they wanted. Never came back, because that comes up in the trials. They're like, so did you want to stay in Tallahassee? And she tries to make it like she liked Tallahassee, but she left immediately, which to me is more just, why I think she was involved. But wow, I can't believe it has already been almost an hour here. Josh, tell the folks what you got coming up on your channel, what shows. I know recently did your head explode with Alec Baldwin? We were covering that, and
my head did explode with Alec Baldwin. I did a whole video. Thank you for prompting me to do a little pitch here for my channel. But
of course,
I did do a whole kind of reaction on the Alec Baldwin developments, because I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I've been a defense attorney nearly as long. I feel like I have a foundation where I can kind of react to, have I ever seen something like this in court? And I've never seen the developments like we saw in the last 48 hours of that trial, with, you've got a prosecutor resigning in the middle of it. You've got the other prosecutor taking the stand. You've got the judge putting on latex gloves to examine evidence. And then you've got the judge dismissing the case with prejudice. All of that stuff in my entire career, I've never seen. So you had it all within one trial right at the very end. And so I did a deep dive into that case and my reaction to that. I have a video on it if anybody wants to check it out, where I just kind of riff on that one for a good 20 or 30 minutes. But every Friday, I've been releasing an episode, pardon me, where we just kind of go through the week, just kind of wrapping up what took place, all the developments and trials, true crime world, things to keep an eye on. And it's just kind of my weekly check-in with everyone. So please check it out. It's also a podcast wherever you guys get your podcasts. If you prefer to listen to it in the car or something, please check it out. But I really, really appreciate coming on here with you and having this discussion. And your community is always so supportive. Every time I've been on a show with you, I get a lot of really nice feedback from everyone. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah, folks. So you know the deal. If you're checking out the pods, giving it 5 stars. If you're checking out the channel, subscribing, leaving comments, getting that stuff in the algorithm. Here's a good question. And one thing I want to ask before I ask this question, this is about will Carrie Morrissey have any repercussions for actions? Here's what I thought was interesting. Did you see when she went out, she did like an impromptu little press conference, and she was like, listen, this evidence just it wasn't involved. They made a bigger deal than it was. The point was, it doesn't matter. You don't get to decide that. Like it's almost like she didn't get it.
No, you're reading my mind. That's exactly my comment. Was that as a prosecutor, your job is not to decide what is the evidence that the defense should have or not, or what you feel is useful to the defense or useful to your case, and therefore only turn that over. You just turn it over and let the judge hash it out. Use it as impeachment. If you felt that these bullets were somehow not important, it's not up to you to make that call. And I mean, having had that role for 10 years, and that was constantly ingrained into us, we would always err on the side of turning stuff over. It was never worth causing trouble, jeopardizing your case or jeopardizing your own bar card to try to not turn over something that stupid and silly. Turn it over, let the judge hash it out. That's the way it all works. Yeah, she to answer that question, I don't think it's over for her. I think it's about to get ugly. I think the political fallout from this is going to be tremendous. That office has oversight in that state. There is, attorney general, whoever it is in that state, is taking a very serious look about how that was handled, because this was the very end of a clown show of a prosecution to begin with. I mean, they going way back to when they first filed it, they had problems, and then leading up to this just tragedy. It was, Shakespearean tragedy, the way it ended in court. And then, for her to feel like she's just going to walk away from this, I think she's in very hot water. I think she's in for some trouble.
Talk about Shakespearean, where the judge is like, listen, I know I said you have to testify, but you don't. It's okay. And she's like, no. I'm going to go up there. And like, it was almost like, talk about it's like a narcissist. It was almost like she thought she was going to go up there and somehow change this with this testimony, and was like, you just made it 1,000 times worse. What everything you just said there didn't help you. And then it gets on cross, and he's like, so did your co-counsel resign today during lunch?
Even when the judge swore her in, she's like, I'm swearing you in upon the request of no one. Like, it was like, I want to make it abundantly clear, we're letting you do this because you're asking for it. Yeah. Johnson retires in the middle. I mean, it was every step of it was just another shock.
That was really and she's like, I like Alec Baldwin, I like his I mean, and then he's like, is it true you called him a cocksucker? I mean, it was I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Comical. It was wild. It was so wild. And again, I keep saying this, like, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say you just do not see that stuff happen in court. And good for him. I mean, I feel bad. A woman's life was lost, and I never want to, belittle that. And I feel awful, but the way this all played out was just a real, it really brought into question the integrity of that office.
Yeah, and it's why you have defense attorneys, because if you don't, it's a police state. If the prosecutors can just hide stuff, not disclose it, like, you can't have it. Because some people were like, oh, this is because he's a celebrity, this is good. No, it's because they hid stuff and they got caught, and we have video of the witness coming in and saying, here's some evidence, and we have testimony from Popple saying, he told me about it, but I made this, they told me to make this special folder that was not part of the regular folder. And we
Just
didn't
mind-blowing.
disclose.
Mind-blowing.
It really is. Sorry for the tangent, guys. And real quick, I'm always very horrible about this on lives because I try to give all my attention to the guests. But real quick, I just want to do this. Jennifer Adams, member of our Bonators, my new $10 membership tier. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Jersey Jen gave out 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Jen. You are awesome. T. Suze gifted out 5 memberships. Thank you so much, T. Suze. Joanne, love Jay and Josh combo. Love you, Joanne. Thank you so much. And Meg P gifting out 10 memberships. I always feel bad during lives when I have guests because during like trials, I can pause and I can, the screen, but like I try to give my full attention to my guests. So I'm sorry if I missed anything. I appreciate you guys very much for being here. Please, everyone, make sure you're subscribing to Josh's channel because he takes the time out of his day after he's on a 4-hour commute and working these cases, and he comes on here and gives us his expertise. I really appreciate it. So please subscribe. And what I'm going to send you, if this should work, right now, Publicly Buzzed is live. And you know what they're covering, Josh? They are covering your former colleague, Alan Jackson. He watches old trials, and he's watching Phil Spector. He's watching...
I was his law clerk on that. Fun fact.
Yeah, so he's watching that trial with, what's her name is the defense attorney? Linda Baden, I think. Is that her name? She's the defense attorney.
Linda Baden.
And they've had Dr. Henry Lee. A lot of names, Dr. Baden was the medical examiner. There's a lot of folks that you may recognize. Yeah. It's interesting. So I hope this works. The portal should take you to that. We call it portal. YouTube can send you to another channel if they're live. So hopefully everyone gets sent over there. Josh, thank you so much. I'm going to play the outro. Just hold on one second. And guys, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. Definitely. Hopefully we can do more lives like this because this was really awesome. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us, J-Bo Nation. Please give all of yourselves an ovation. No, it won't be real long until next time. Oh, J-Bo Nation, there's no place we'd rather be. J-Bo Nation is the place to 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 be.